Hello there, this is Mr. Doty again. We're going to work on another section of AutoCAD drawing commands and see what we can do with these. So normally you start off on your Start tab here, and as you can see, here's some of the ones that I've worked on before. We talked about some different commands, and I can click back over here on my drawing. Notice it says Drawing 1. Now, if I was doing an assignment, I'd probably want to think about what I want to name it, the assignment name or project name, whatever it is, and maybe go ahead and save it just so that I'm good to go and this little guy pops up. So what will we call it? Well, in this case, I'm just going to call it drawing practice. Let's see, drawing practice vid 4, because this is the 4th video and I'm going to save it. There we go. Alright, so I've saved my drawing. So now every so often I'm going to use the shortcut Control S on the keyboard, or up here and click on this little diskette up here for save, and make sure I keep my stuff. Alright, so in previous videos we've talked about some of these other drawing commands. We had the line command, polyline command, circle command with all its different options. We talked about the rectangle command, and the fact that the rectangle is also a polyline. I also mentioned the pedit and join commands so that you can figure out how to make lines into polylines, or arcs into polylines, and so on. So your other option over here on the drawing tab is the arc command. I'll be honest with you, I don't use a whole lot of them because most of the time I can do something with a circle and get what I want easier than I can trying to figure out which one of these different versions I want to use, unless it's a 3-point. It's like if you've been given 3 exact points, coordinates, you can actually turn off dynamic mode and put in those 3 actual coordinates and end up with an arc that looks a certain way, which is what you're going to do later on in a tutorial that I'll create a video for as well. So don't worry about that right now. Let's just worry about the fact that the 3-point arc is probably the easiest one. The only other one that I typically use is start and direction. So you have a start, you have an end, and then you have the direction, so you can give it a slight arc, or you can make a half circle, which is typically what I use it for. So if you have a line, or in this case, let's just go back and hit escape. Let's use a rectangle. If you had a rectangle and you needed to put an arc in that shape, this is where your 3-point arc would come in handy. So you pick here, you pick your midpoint, and then you pick that. And you're saying, hey, why does it do that? Well, those are object snaps, and that's something else that I will just make a video and talk about as we move along. They're just really simple settings that you can pick on the little down arrow right here, and these are the ones I have set up: endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, extension, and apparent intersection. Those are all ones that I like to use. The ones that I added from out of the box is midpoint, extension, and apparent intersection. Now, those guys actually are pretty handy and nice to have on there. You can get them automatically, like when you go into a line command and they pop up automatically. And then I've got these options here where it'll line up with 2 different ones if I want to. And of course, I have my polar turned on, and I have my polar set. Needs to be set to 15 degrees. That way I can lock in every 15 degrees. There we go. But this is mainly what I was talking about as far as this is what a good use of a three-point curve is. You box in where you need your arc and then you put it in there. Otherwise, I'm probably going to use some variation of the circle command to draw in my geometry that's, you know, round. Okay, so that's your arc. Like I said, you got all these different options. You can play around with them, see what each one of them does. Most of the time, by the time I've figured out how to use one of those other options, I've already drawn a circle and trimmed it out and modified it to where it works. Alright, so let's go up here, and we already talked about the rectangle. The next one in the rectangle, or under the rectangle, is the polygon. Now, before you use a polygon, let me just say this. You're better off to have a circle. So let's draw us a circle in here. There's a circle. Now, let's go back to polygon. And the first thing it asks you is, how many sides do you want? Well, obviously, you can go anywhere from 3 sides up to however many sides you want. And nothing was spilled, and we're all good. So, how many sides do we want? Well, I can make a square with the rectangle command, so 4 is probably not it. Well, let's just do a hexagon. So 6 sides. And then it says, where's the center? Well, this is why we need to have a circle to start with. Helps us figure things out. So there's the center. And then it gives us this option. It says, okay, I have inscribed and circumscribed. What the heck does that mean? Well, if you think about it, well, that means it's on the inside of the circle here. And then circumscribed about, that means it's on the outside. Now, the funny thing is whoever made this programming didn't think about what drafting terms we use when we're describing these kinds of shapes. It's either across the corners or across the flats. And you're like, what do you mean? Alright, well, let's just say that we do inscribed inside the circle, right? So let's do this one, and let's put it inside the circle, and let's just do like that. Alright, so the circle that we drew it out to, or used as the radius, and that's the other thing, the dimension you're given is always a diameter, but yet the dimension that you need to use for this is a radius. Another miscommunication, and whoever designed this versus actual drafting practices. Alright, so anyway, this is on the inside, and you'll notice that the corners are touching the circle. So this is the distance across the corners, which would be the diameter. So just remember, when you're using this, you're going to have to cut that distance that it gives you on the drawing, whether it's across the flats or across the corners, divide it in half, and then that'll be what you put in for your command. Alright, so let's do this again. Boom. I'm going to keep 6. So I hit enter, and there's the center point. This time we'll go on outside, and so I'll pick the same spot. Now you're going to notice that it's on the outside, and notice that it's flats, right? This is across the flats. So circumscribed on the outside or about the circle is across the flats. So there you go. You've learned something new today. This is how you make a bolt head, actually, too, is you have a circle and then you have your nice hexagon there, and so then you have a hex-headed cap screw or hex bolt. Alright, so that's polygon. And you can make, like I said, you can make how many sides? You want a triangle? Okay, fine. You make a triangle. And center a polygon, and whichever one you want it to be. And there you go. There's a triangle. And if we added some other stuff, we could have a little Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and prismy thing there, and there you go. That'd be awesome, right? Gotta have some Pink Floyd. Alright, so the next thing moving on down is you have your ellipse command. And I'll be honest with you, this one right here is probably the one I use the most, because typically I have a center point. So let's say, well, first of all, let's just do this. A lot of times you have other geometry that you're drawing inside of, let's just say, or you have some kind of a axis that you're using to draw your ellipse. So let's just look at it this way. So I'll go center. Well, specify the center of the ellipse. Well, in this case, I don't have the center, but I do down here. So let's just do this. We'll do this, and then it says how long is, so basically what's halfway across, or let's see what happens. It should be the center, so this should be half of one axis, and then your half of the other. So if you can figure out what half of the minor axis and half of the major axis is, then you can locate it by center. Pretty simple. How could I do that up here? Well, pretty easy. Go back over here, and see, I'm picking this little thing, so I'll make sure I hit the right one, because sometimes I forget what the picture looks like. If you hold down Control and right click, you can get mid between 2 points. And so I'm going to pick this midpoint and this midpoint, and boom, there it is. And see, then I can pick that midpoint and that midpoint, and now I've got that boxed out, and I'm happy. Later on, we're going to learn how to use the isometric, and that's where you're going to, when you see a circle in isometric, it's usually an ellipse because it flattens out, and we'll be using these to do that with. Alright, so the other one is axis and endpoint. So, alright, well, let's draw us another line. Need to have some reference geometry here, so there it is. Then we're going to go back over here and do axis end. So this time I've got both ends of it, and then I have the minor. So if you have both ends, you know how long it needs to be that way, then you can do it there. So it's all good. Your last option is the elliptical arc, and basically what that is, depending on which side you pick first is which side it shows up on. So let's say if I pick the left hand side first, and then I pick what angle I want it to be, or the height I want it to be, sorry. So you pick it, and then you pick what parts you want to keep. So if I go, so I guess it doesn't matter which one you pick first there, but it does here. If I pick on the left and go to the right, it's going to keep the bottom part. So you're saying, okay, I don't get that, so let's try that again. Let me draw another line. Alright, so drew another line. Let's go back up here and use this again. So I'm going to go left to right and pick my axis, right? And then I'm going to pick my height. Now, if I pick on the right side and go down on the left, or down over to the left, then it keeps the top. And you're like, wait a minute, how does that work? Well, let's look at it again. You know, repetition does help, right? So let's just do this. Let's start on this side and see if it makes any difference. It doesn't. Now let's start on the left. See, it does make a difference. So it doesn't matter if where you start your axis line to begin with, but it does matter on which side, or which side you start to determine which side you keep. If you start on the left, it's going down. If you start on the right, it's going up. So that's the difference. Go back and look at the video again, and you can see what I did. You're like, ooh, okay. Don't you love it when people tell you what to do? Isn't it great? So I've been drawing for a little while. You know what I need to do? I need to hit save. There we go. We've saved our bunch of geometry here. Alright, so we've covered, so far we've hit most everything in here. We've got line, polyline, circle, arcs, rectangles, polygons, ellipses, and then you have hatch. Alright, well, we don't use it a whole lot in the beginning class, but it is something cool to know. So if you use hatch, and you'll get this little menu up here that pops up. It adds over here. It's just another ribbon tab, and you have a pattern you can pick. Here's all the different patterns. You can do solids, you can do all these different ones that show different materials. So if you know what the material is, what the actual line type is for it, or section pattern, then you can put it on there. You've got brick, you've got concrete, you've got shakes, brass, bricks, box, sands, I don't know about the clay, cork, crosses, all kinds of different ones you can use. And you can actually go download them also, find other patterns that you might use. Then they have, you can do gradients and have them look all kinds of interesting colors. You have grass, great. So you have all kinds of different ones you can flip down through here and look at. Alright, so typically we use the ANSI 31 just because, and so boom, there it is. So that is a 1 scale. So apparently I do this really big. Well, I can come up here and change my scale, change it to 4. And then there it is. Now it looks a little better. If I didn't like it, that'd be fine. If I need to change the angle. So right now my angle's set at 0, but what if I added 15 degrees to it? So then I can make it at 60. What if I put in a negative 15 degrees? Then I can make it 30. So if I had multiple hatch patterns close together, I can change the angle to make it work for what I want. Alright, now this is set up associative so that it's all hooked together, which it's supposed to be anyway. It's a pattern. If I change my geometry most of the time, the hatch pattern will fix as well. So I can keep doing this as long as it's a closed-in object, like, see there, I can go inside of here. Notice that if I wanted to continue it, I'd have to pick outside of the box here. And it has to be something that's inside of where you're, where you're looking at for it to work. Just something to remember. Used to, it wouldn't work unless you were zoomed into that area and you could pick all the parts at one time. Now you can kind of move around and, it'll start picking things up for you. Alright, so that's basically a hatch pattern. When you're done, you hit close, hit the little check mark, and there it is. And see, these are all one entity, right? See, they're all hooked together. So if you want to edit them, you can, well, if you just pick it, it goes into edit mode, then you can change it, change the pattern to whatever, and hit close. There you go. So that's a hatch command. Pretty simple, pretty easy. You got some other things under your draw command here. Click on this, pin that down, okay. Alright, so you have spline fit, you have a spline CV, which constant control vertices, that's what it is. Like I said, when I mentioned these in the polyline, I mentioned splines and the fact that they don't go through the actual points you use for the most part. Alright, then you have a thing called XLine, which is basically just an infinite line, right? Goes each direction. It is a true line. It goes on to infinity. Then you have the ray command, which is kind of cool because if you need to go from here, but you want to go in an infinite direction that way or infinite distance that way, just so that you know that it's going to hit, anything that you need, you can do that. And this is called a ray. A ray, not a ray. Then you also have points, or multiple points. I don't use that one very much. Divide. Now, divide's kind of cool. I'm not sure why it's here instead of under modify, but here's what happens. So what if you needed to divide this arc into 5 pieces? So what you can do is you can take your divide command, pick your arc, and say you want to divide it into 5 pieces, and you hit enter. Well, then you're like, wait a minute, they didn't do anything. Well, yeah, I did. What you have to do is you have to go up here to Format and go to Point Style right here. You go to Point Style, change your point type. See, right now it's a dot. Can't see the dot because it's on the line, right? So hit your X or whatever, and hit OK. Oh, there it is. And you're like, okay, well, how do I hook onto those? Well, if you want to draw a line that goes from, oh, I don't know, I guess that's the center, from the center to each one of those things, you're like, well, it's not hooking on. Well, those are called nodes. So if I type in node, and then I can hook onto it. You could also come down here while you're in the middle of the program or your command and click on node and turn that on, and then go to the node like so. I'm using my space bar as my enter key. See, and I'm just going back into line command by hitting enter. But I drew it to the node on each one of those, and I'm missing one, so I need to go back over here and put it from there to there. So each one of those is a node, and that's just the kind of geometry that they call it, and that is one of the things that you can pick that you can hook onto. I usually don't leave it on unless I'm going to be using it a bunch, and then I can go back and turn it off. Just, you know, you don't want to have too many of those going on, because if you have too many of them, it can get confusing if you have a whole lot of geometry mixed up, and then you might pick the wrong point accidentally. So that's pretty much most of the things under the draw. You also have the donut command, which is kind of cool. So the donut command, so if you have a diameter inside of 0.5 and then an outside diameter of 1. Alright, so there you go. We got donuts. So you can sit here and you can draw you two wheels, draw you some geometry over it, right? Put some arcs on it, and then you can make a little Volkswagen Beetle, right? Draw a line across there, and then you'd have your little cute Volkswagen Beetle. I like Volkswagens. They're pretty cool. The other thing you can do with this is go back into it, change your inside diameter to 0, outside diameter to 1, and then you have dots. So if you ever see a schematic where you need to draw a wiring diagram and you want to show where the connection points are, you can use a donut to make your holes. What it does is basically it's kind of like hatch and circle together. So kind of neat, kind of fun. And really that's all the ones that we're going to probably use. So that's all I got on this video, so we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one.